Welcome to the Iratus Complication, a Stargate Atlantis rewatch podcast. You are joined by myself, Michael, and my co-host, Grant.
Yes, me.
This episode, we're going to be talking about Stargate Atlantis Season 1, Episodes 10 and 11. Those episodes are The Storm and The Eye, respectively.
Yes.
It is a two-part episode. Literally, one ends and it opens on almost exactly the same shot.
But with rain.
Yes, but with actual rain this time.
We'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Boy, was that good. Good stuff. Very tense.
I really enjoy the episode just because you usually only get that kind of intense, epic feel for, well, season finales, right?
Yeah, it was very movie-like. Could have been a film. I don't know. As a two-parter, the structure was such that it felt less like television and more like a silver screen situation.
Yeah, and I mean, this is another episode that has only an A plot. Like, there's no B plot.
They do split people up, but yeah, the plot is, well, I mean, I don't know. They're pretty intertwined, but there are two things going on. It's the Storm and the Janai.
Well, okay, there are two things involved, but there's only really one thing that's happening, and it gets exacerbated by the Janai. So
yeah.
For a little recap for viewers who may not remember, in the Storm, essentially it starts out and we see that a giant hurricane is heading to hit Atlantis.
It's so big.
Yeah.
It's like impossibly large by Earth standards. Just very big. Yeah.
It is apparently the joining of two hurricanes.
Yes, which were already big.
Yeah. And it's going to destroy Atlantis, normal doomsday type scenario.
There's a lot of lamp shading in this episode that I marked out, but we'll get there.
They find out about this big storm. So now, A, they've got to figure out a way to avoid Atlantis being destroyed, and B, they need to find some place to evacuate to. So they end up evacuating to a place called Mineria with some, shall we say, persuasion of the local magistrate.
It's vague, threatening. Shepard is very military this whole episode. Very aggressive, yeah.
We don't see any of the, morally conflicted Shepard in this one.
Nope.
The Minerians reluctantly agree to host the Atlanteans while the storm is going to hit the city. And as it turns out, the Minerians are working for the Janai.
Yeah, he produces that communicator, and it's very clearly got those same vertical lights that the Janai wrist communicator device does.
Yeah, very, very distinct technology, right? Mm-hmm. You can tell what is Janai and what is Atlantean and what is Wraith.
Yes.
There are good lines of distinction in this.
Yes.
In this universe.
Yeah.
So the Janai end up showing up and they manage to convince one of the Athosians to give them their IDC so that they can get past the shield to Atlantis. Mm-hmm. So the storm is the storm is raging. The storm is the natural disaster that's going to bring everything to the end, but it's really a plot contrivance to make it so that the Janai can invade Atlantis.
Yes.
There is really no other function of the storm other than to put time pressure, which is why I don't consider it like an A plot and a B plot, because without the storm, the Janai wouldn't be there, right? The storm is the MacGuffin for this story, if we're being absolutely honest.
Yeah, it's stakes and a time limit, and it adds just inherently to the fact that it is a storm adds some sort of drama and weight.
And it's also the only reason that there's only 6 people on Atlantis.
Right.
We get the Janai coming to Atlantis.
Yeah.
They bust in and kill the 2 random red shirts that are guarding the gate, and then take Weir and McKay hostage.
There were some interesting things at the beginning. I thought it was I just like it when Stargate acknowledges things, like they're looking at this thing from space, and it would be so easy to have Taylor be like, that's a big hurricane, or just something, normal. She would never say that, but that is a rather large storm, is it not? Or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
The way she speaks. But she doesn't know what storms look like from space. She's like, is this normal? Because she's never been in a spacecraft before. So the little touches like that, I think, really...
It grounds the series.
Yes, yeah, always grounding things.
So the Janai capture Dr. Weir and Dr. McKay and hold them hostage, and basically, essentially, all they want is all their medical supplies and C4, and they want the little Wraith flash drive back. And the only person left on the base who can do anything about it is Shepard. And he's off doing his job because, as it turns out, they have a plan to save the city, and that plan is to use lightning strikes from the incoming storm to power the shield generator. Of course, in order to do this, they have to get rid of all of the lightning rods that are all around, well, the grounding stations to the lightning rods that are all around Atlantis.
That dissipated into the ocean. Normally,
there are 4 grounding stations, 2 of which have already been deactivated one by Dr. Weir, one by Dr. McKay, and now Shepard has to deactivate the remaining 2. At the beginning of the episode, before the Janai get into the gate room, he has deactivated 1, and he's on his way to the last station. So there's our time pressure, right?
Yeah.
As the Janai invade, obviously that stops Shepard from focusing on getting that last grounding station. There is now this threat that lightning's going to hit. It's going to be directed into the ocean. It's not actually going to power the shield generator, and Atlantis is going to be broken apart by this giant mega storm. Of course, the Janai don't know that initially. They just want all the C4 and everything, and they're planning on just raiding the city and then leaving. And they're led by a character who will be recurring in later seasons. One of my favorite antagonists, I will have to say, in the series, which is Acostus Colia, who acts as the Jedi foil to Commander Shepard. Unlike other enemies that we will see, other humans that we will see, he's the only one who's really portrayed to be as intelligent and on Shepard's level.
Yeah.
We'll see a lot of other human enemies that essentially Shepard mostly outwits, but Colia seems to be Shepard's equal in a lot of ways. They take Doctors McKay and Weir hostage, and they're going to get all the C4 medical supplies, and McKay just manages to barely, without getting himself killed for doing something stupid, manages to alert Shepard that they want the C4 medical supplies. So what does Shepard do? He hides all the C4. Pretty straightforward. And then there's a constant back and forth throughout the episode, which I really like, between Colia and Shepard, which really helps develop Shepard's character and Colia's character.
Yeah. They get to communicate over the radios.
Yeah, and the fact that every time that Shepard does something that's like, I have thwarted your evil plan, to Colia's like, okay, let's be honest, I know what you're doing. I don't think that you would sacrifice Dr. Weir and Dr. McKay, and if you don't do what I say, I am going to kill them, because that's just the kind of guy I am, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of back and forth between them where they're both kind of testing each other.
Yeah, probing.
Which I think is excellent, because it shows that Colia is both intelligent and ruthless. It really does develop their character a lot. And I mean, sure, it's very Die Hard, right? This is the Die Hard episode.
Yeah.
Where Shepard plays John McClane, and you've got Colia as Hans Gruber, right?
Yes, 100%.
Although you don't have Alan Rickman, so
bit of a bummer. But the guy who played Colia did a great job.
Robert Davi does a great job, and I mean, he was in a lot of 80s action movies, usually as like bit parts, like he, like a heavy here or a heavy there. He was the lead villain in License to Kill, the James Bond film.
So a couple of the were you done with the recap, more or less?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, the episode is pretty boring when you break it down plot wise.
To speak about it is very simple, because it's very action oriented. So watching it unfold is very engrossing. But to describe it, there's a lot. It's not like, oh yeah, that's interesting. There's
a lot of tension. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of character development. But essentially, the plot can be summed up is that there's a big storm coming. McKay has a plan. The Jedi are going to seize the city, and they hold Weir and McKay hostage. Shepard has to thwart them, so Shepard goes around doing little sabotage actions, and then the Jedi catch on to this and threaten Shepard, and they threaten Weir, and they threaten McKay, and then stuff happens. There are complications. The really only big plot point that happens is that Shepard is about to deactivate the last grounding station, and the Jedi get in a firefight with Shepard and break the grounding station, which is just basically a delaying what ends up being effectively a delaying tactic while McKay and Weir have something to do repairing this grounding station.
Yeah.
There's the slight extra bit where reinforcements are on their way because Beckett, Taylor, and Ford are in a jumper on the mainland because they got stuck in the storm, so they stayed on the mainland rather than evacuating. But if we're being honest, that's the plot, right? And we all know how this ends. The good guys are going to triumph and beat back the invaders, right?
Right.
It's great to watch. It's fun. It's action-packed. But the plot, if you try and break it down in a sentence summary, is relatively boring. So I don't think a plot recap necessarily works for this episode.
Good point.
But I think there's a lot to talk about, though.
Yes. I'm going to dive into it, if you don't mind terribly.
Oh, please.
So I said the Taylor thing about the storms in space. There's one of the examples of sort of just handily lampshading, which is a term I use a lot. That means calling attention to perhaps a hole in the script or something that is not acknowledged by just simply acknowledging it and being like, yes, we know, and then moving on. Which Stargate has a penchant for doing that. So Shepard's like saying what we're thinking. Well, the ancients built this place. Surely it can, withstand a hurricane, even a big one, right? It's the ancients are, it's futuristic. It's building materials, what have you. Shepard says, well, can Atlantis take it? And McKay just goes, no. And then they move on.
Well, they give a slight explanation that essentially the ancients had a shield, so if they needed the shield, they would just power it on and be like, all right, we're good.
Yes, and that does fly with me personally. Like, why? I mean, obviously Atlantis is very pretty, right? There's a lot of aesthetic choices made in the design of it. Everything we see, there's lights everywhere, and there are words, and it's beautiful, the architecture.
But it's very spindly.
Yes, so it seems like, okay, I mean, that does track. I'm not saying it doesn't work. If you have a energy shield that will just simply protect everything without fail, you can build shit out of whatever you want, and it doesn't have to withstand anything. So you can just make it pretty. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So yeah, that works. We talked a little bit about how Shepard and Ford just kind of thinly veiled threaten the Manarians to make sure that they allow everyone in Atlantis to sequester there during the storm.
Yeah.
Which was weird, kind of.
It makes sense, but it's very much the screenwriters couldn't figure out how to make it so that there was some impetus for the Manarians to call the Janai, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like if they had been like, yeah, sure, you can stay here, that's fine, stay here for a night, they wouldn't have called the Janai, but oh, now we're being threatened? Well, okay, well, I'm going to tell the Janai on you because then the Janai will give me stuff, right?
I think it would have been the fact that he just had the Janai communicator. He produces it from like off-screen, negative space, like behind his back, right? He has it. He literally has it. He doesn't go pick it up from a thing. He just has it on his person. So I think it honestly, they didn't need to do that. It would have been better just to be like, of course, you can stay. He's very warm. He's very welcoming. And then he calls the Janai, right?
Yeah, but the Manarian leader is visually and dialogue wise very representative of, and I hate to use the stereotype, but a used car salesman. Right.
Well, yeah, but he didn't have to be. We haven't seen him before. He was written for this.
No, yeah, and
casted for
but
it.
he's not written as a Janai spy, which is something that we'll find out later, that the Pegasus Galaxy is rife with Janai spies. It's a recurring theme in later seasons. It kind of starts that plot line, but not really. And I think if he was getting something out of the deal, I don't think he would necessarily call the Janai. I think he just likes playing whatever card he has available to get him the best deal that he can. And I think it's really implied that he doesn't like being put in this position, even though he understands that diplomatically he has to. And he's like, I can call the Janai because the Janai I know the Janai, and the Janai don't like the Atlanteans, and the Atlanteans are going to be out of the city. I don't think Shepard would have been suspicious if he had been like, okay, fine, you all can come here. I see that you guys are in need. Sure, we'll owe you a favor, right? So I think that if Shepard had offered him something of worth, which is what he was asking for, right, that he wouldn't have called the Janai. I think he's written as a scheming politician character.
Yeah. So he does call the Janai, offers the trade. Oh yeah, again, more lampshading. when Shepard is like talking to McKay, well, you just said that thing about the shield. Why do they have lightning rods? And then Rodney says, we don't have time for this. And then they move on.
Yeah,
So they're like, okay, the audience is going to ask that. And they're like, okay, have Shepard ask it. And then don't answer it.
actually, I think you want to go back and check your notes. That was not lampshaded. He explains that the only thing that a shield is good for is draining power.
It was a little bit of hand waving, which I'm always fine with. It didn't take me out of it at all. I just, in fact, I appreciate it. I appreciate that they have characters ask questions that the audience are thinking.
Yeah.
And you're right, something was offered there. I think it's a little bit less than the answer for the last one I called out.
Yeah, it's definitely like, let's not talk about it.
Yeah. But better to have acknowledged it than not at all. And I think it's perfectly adequate. Some other things I called out. When Shepard, there's a shot, the camera looks like a crane shot. The camera moves down, and it's shooting through the windshield into a darkened puddle jumper. And then the lights sort of turn on in sequence as Shepard moves through it. I just thought that was neat. It was a pretty good little shot. And how the jumper just senses when you're there and turns things on that you need. This episode also, both of them cement that Weir is still trying to be a diplomat throughout all of it, trying to make everyone see reason. But she also very intelligently lies whenever it helps people. She and Rodney both are practicing some deception that's really intelligent. She lies and says Shepard is on the mainland.
Yeah, she is willing to lie to protect other people.
Yeah. For sure.
Now, McKay will tell you whatever you want to hear. Let's be honest.
Yes.
Right? He lies for 90% of this, even though he claims to be bad at bluffing.
Excellent at it.
Although he does have one important moment of honesty towards the end where he says, and this is possibly my favorite Rodney line throughout the entire series, which is, in case you haven't noticed, I'm an extremely arrogant man who tends to think all of his plans will work. Which encompasses the entirety of McKay's character.
That was good. Also, right after Weir's like, no, Shepard's on the mainland, McKay is like, well, just give them what they want, Weir, but then leans on the console to transmit everything. And he recaps what the Jedi are trying to do through the PA system on Atlantis so that Shepard can hear it. And I was like, yes, good. A lot of good thinking on their feet. In this episode.
Everybody in this episode is like the most clever versions of themselves.
Yes, yeah. Everybody's thinking on their feet and pulling their weight.
The episodes do a good way of showing that the Jedi can match the Atlantis expedition in terms of intelligent thought, because everybody's on point in this episode, and you really don't. And this is key to the tension of the episode. You really don't feel that Shepard is definitely going to 100% win. But you definitely don't feel that the Jedi are 100% going to win. And of course, it's a TV series, point of view characters and all that. You know that Atlantis is going to survive. These episodes give us a solid understanding that the Jedi can and will continue to go up against the Atlantis expedition, and sometimes they might even win.
Yeah.
Like, at the end of this episode, sure, they're knocked back, but if you notice in the last couple of scenes, they're taking a whole bunch of medical supplies with them. They don't leave empty-handed.
Oh, I didn't even notice that. I didn't notice that.
They don't have the C4 because Shepard's hidden the C4 somewhere, but they definitely have some of the medical supplies that they raided from the infirmary.
Damn, okay, yeah. Without even the people that he shoots, Shepard kills 55 Jedi soldiers by activating the gate shield while they're in the middle of gating to Atlantis. And there's no way to tell him that happened. And so they just all splatter.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of the second or third episode of SG-1.
Bugs on a windshield. There was this interesting part, going back a little bit, where obviously Dr. Beckett, is waiting with the latter half of the team on the mainland, waiting out the storm. And he gets nervous at one point. A tree gets knocked over, and he reaches over to the console and he says, I'm adding a weight to the puddle jumper by adjusting the inertial dampeners, which is just an interesting little bit of lore. And it also gives us a clue as to the propulsion method, why there are no thrusters. There's thrusters on the back, but there's no thrusters when it lifts off and when it descends, right?
Well, the bottom glows.
It does?
There are implied thrusters on the bottom of the ship.
Oh, okay. Huh.
And the reason that it can go through the gate, which we encountered in 38 minutes, is that goes through via inertia.
I just thought that was interesting. That was an interesting little tidbit about the function of the thing. You had called out that there's sort of there is a callback to the good old Real Meaning of Life stuff episode. It was a phenomenal episode of SG-1. Do I care about this as a spoiler?
Who cares? If you are watching Atlantis and you haven't watched SG-1, okay, that is something that you can do. They are roughly separate series. There is no necessity to watch SG-1 before watching Atlantis. And I will say that I'm someone who doesn't get worried about spoilers. Personally, I can know the ending to a piece of media and still enjoy that media.
Of course, the journey is still fun, but I find trying to eke out. I'm always trying to get the most out of anything I consume.
And I really don't consider that to be a super important episode for the ending.
Yeah.
There are other SG-1 episodes where, like, if I told you the ending, it spoils like 7 seasons worth of build-up, kind of BS, right?
Oh, sure, yeah.
In this case, using lightning to power a Stargate, that's not really going to ruin anybody's viewing experience.
Yeah, and also we haven't even said the episode name, so you won't even know. Anyway, they do, and this is something I love about the series as a whole, is it doesn't forget where it's been. So many episodic shows, right? Just every episode exists in a vacuum. They don't really acknowledge where they've been before, what they've done, who they've known. But Stargate from Go was pretty good about being like, oh, this is like when this happened on this time, and it just means that there's just some consistency in the writing team, and people are just aware, and it helps make it a cohesive, grounded world. So them calling back that lightning's been used to power the Stargate before feels good.
Yeah, there's also visual continuity that is kept between various episodes. So for example, in I think it was Rising, a dart fires through the Stargate into Stargate operations and scorches the wall, and in the background of one of the scenes you can see that scorch mark.
Sick.
Like, it's just kept on the set, and it makes the place feel a lot more lived in. It makes the series feel a lot realer. Now, I'm not going to say that they always 100% always have the exacting level of detail to continuity or anything.
Right.
But the amount of detail that they do place on it is quite impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I agree. I have one more note, and then I will defer to you. Two more. I lied to you. I just lied right to you. So you're gonna just have to deal with that. There was just a good bit of editing. There's like a walk and talk where they're recapping the plan for the power that was established in episode 10. This is in episode 11. And it's cutting between Shepard explaining it to Taylor and Ford and Beckett, and sort of McKay rehashing it to either Weir or the Janai or Kolya. But they're sort of together. Those two, they jump between the two, and there's some like finishing each other's sentences somewhat. And I was like, nice. That was pretty clean.
Yeah,
that was well done.
It's a very well done intercut dialogue.
Yeah. It's not jarring at all. So I appreciated that from an editing standpoint. And then at the end of the episode, everything's fine. Sora is captured.
Yeah, there is the resolution of the Tyrus being killed subplot, which kind of sets the Janai and the Atlanteans at each other's throats. Obviously, they were always going to double cross each other. That's not in question here. But the fact that Tyrus died kind of made Cowan a lot more suspicious of the Atlantis expedition, right, I will say. So yeah, we get Sora trying to, having probably joined the strike force specifically to avenge her father by killing Taylor Amaga.
Yes. So yes, Taylor and Sora fight. It's awesome. It's pretty good choreography-wise. There's not too much obscuring action with camera movements, just to make up for bad choreography. It seems pretty good. She does the classic Winter Soldier knife drop, catch it with the other hand thing. Of course, this vastly preceded that, but I'm sure there's examples of that maneuver long before.
Yeah, there's probably half a dozen kung fu movies that have it somewhere.
Yeah. But it was great. It was well executed, and it was. There was one moment where particularly the vocalizations they were making seemed softer than the action would seem to require, if that makes sense. It was like, I was like, that's kind of weird. But the actual action was a good fight. It's good stuff. And then Taylor's like, basically at the end, angrily, like, the subtext, the gist of it is, we were supposed to be allies, you don't have to do this. And then I thought she just like, angrily, like, throws the knife on the floor and then runs off to regroup with the rest of the team in the control room. But what she actually did was throw the knife into the floor of Atlantis, so it's stuck, and that's revealed when she
Yeah, and those are concrete looking floors.
Yeah, it was insane. It was like,
it will
whoa.
be implied several times throughout the series that not only is Taylor an excellent fighter, but Taylor also essentially has somewhat superhuman strength.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I swear it is implied that she is stronger than any other member of the expedition. The only member of the Atlantis team that I am aware of that is ever shown to be able to keep up with Taylor, okay? Not just in a combat sense, but also somewhat in a strength sense, is Ronan Dex later on in later seasons.
Sure.
And Ronan is very clearly established to be superhuman in the same way that Teal'c is superhuman.
Right. Yeah, Teal'c is he has the symbiote. It's like partially that he's just very big and very strong, and then the other half is a symbiote situation.
Yeah, Ronan Dex is just Ronan Dex.
Yeah.
It's kind of also implied that Taylor is stronger than you would expect, and maybe part of that is just because, all of the Atlantis expedition, well, not just combat skills, but all the Atlantis expedition leads relatively cushy lives. And while we know that the Athosians are more advanced than they present as,
right,
due to the particle lighter that they have that they don't ever bring up again. So they also live a very, hunter-gatherer, minimally agrarian society is kind of what it's implied.
Yeah, they say in this episode, the reason that they're waiting for all of them to come back, Taylor's like, my people are hunters. Some of them may be miles away trying to evacuate.
Yeah. And they are a somewhat agrarian society, but like the camps that we see are very reminiscent of nomadic Earth tribes, right? The stuff that we see, to me, is very Mongolian in kind of view. That those are the kind of huts that they live in. So that implies to me, not that it's ever explicitly stated, but that implies that they are somewhat nomadic people. They probably do a lot more physical labor than we would do.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They're just generally more fit.
I would argue that most people who don't work out, who don't work a manual labor job, like if you work an office job and you don't spend your time working out, I would say you probably can't lug 100-pound object for 20 feet.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I probably can't. Yeah. For example, Taylor can hold her own against a Wraith.
Yeah, and
Wraith have superhuman strength.
But so you're talking about that fight from a couple episodes where the Wraith that they eventually capture is engaged in combat with Taylor. They do have superhuman strength, but the way that is the way it reads to me is yes, she's strong, but it's just combat prowess. I mean, she has the bow staff and
I mean, there are later episodes where we will see Wraith literally chuck people across a room.
Yes. Yeah. True. Fair.
I am not saying she's Superman. I'm just saying she is definitely stronger than the average human.
Yeah, that's true. That does seem to be true.
And much stronger than anybody on the Atlantis expedition.
And the fight between Sora was pretty good, but it also did a good job of communicating that Taylor's confidence, which you said, if you try to fight me like this, I will win, was not misplaced. It wasn't really a contest. She's throwing her around the whole time. Taylor's throwing around Sora the whole time. The last note I had is that McKay, we get another McKay is hungry line right at the end where he says, someone says, how are you doing or something? He's like, well, I have had the first decent meal in 24 hours, so I think things are going pretty well.
Another thing from that scene that I love is Beckett still has a concussion and can't take a look at McKay. At one point was mildly tortured and he ends up with a bloodied arm, and so McKay has had to bandage himself. There's a great little a bit at the end during the pull away crane shot where McKay is trying to show Shepard and Weir, who have walked off at this point, his impressive little bandage job that he's done, which I think is just a lovely kind of for the type of person that McKay is, he would definitely want to be like, see, I can do it all by myself. And it looks pretty good, doesn't it? Except you realize on the second or third watching, and I mentioned this to you while we were watching it.
Yes.
He has bandaged himself not under his clothes, but over his sleeves.
Yeah.
He can't remove his jacket until he undoes his bandage bandage, which is using like 300% more gauze than he needs, of course.
Oh yeah, it's like wrapped thick, and he's like, "Well, I just did it myself," and he's like proudly, like a little boy, just like shows his arm, and it's over his jacket, which means it's also over the long sleeve shirts they wear underneath it. They cut away clothing when they want to bandage you. Like in cinema and in real life, they have scissors so they can cut through clothing just to make sure they're actually interacting with the wound directly. And he just wrapped way too much gauze over his jacket.
Gotta
Very
love
silly.
McKay. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I think you covered pretty much all my points. I don't think, again, it's a fun episode to watch. I just don't think there's much other than like character elements to talk about for this episode. And I do highlight, these are the 2 episodes that if somebody said, okay, you have 2 episodes to show somebody of Stargate Atlantis, and maybe like these aren't necessarily what I would choose to like be like, now you need to continue watching the series. But if I wanted to sit somebody down for 2 episodes, I would sit them down for these 2 episodes because I think they're entertaining. There's a lot of good tension. There are sci-fi elements, but there's not a huge amount of like ludicrous sci-fi stuff, right?
Yeah.
So if you were introducing somebody to Stargate, I might start with these episodes.
Yeah, and it doesn't. There's not. We talked about how they acknowledge previous episodes, but there's enough character development here, and indeed, just everyone's very much. They're the best versions of themselves, like they said, but they're also very themselves. So I think you could jump on here as much as it would make me itch. Did not start at the beginning. You could onboard someone here. They would understand pretty effectively who Rodney McKay is, who John Shepard is,
who Taylor is, who Weir is, even who Beckett is. I mean, Beckett's very passive for most of this episode, if we're being absolutely honest, right? Mm-hmm. He's just kind of there. And you also get a feeling for Ford, which is that Ford really, really, really wants to be in command, but is probably not competent enough to be in command.
Yeah.
He has no tact. And I say that and I love Ford. Okay, I love Ford's character, but Ford should not be given a command at all in his life. Because as soon as he's given a little bit of power over somebody, he's like, all right, you're going to do what I say, and that's it. I'm not going to listen to you, kind of arrogance. And we'll see an extension of that going into the 2nd season, especially when we develop Ford's character a little bit more in the beginning of the 2nd season.
Yeah, and the one thing about, and contrary to what I just said, is that as we noted, Shepard is awesome in these 2 episodes. But he, the moral paragon aspect of virtually every Stargate character is just not present here. So someone could come away with the impression that Shepard is far more generally violent and cold than he is. But that would be, the next episode, I'm sure, will easily ease that if they want to just continue on there.
I agree that he's much colder, but I will say this. One of the things that they definitely did when writing this episode is made sure that Shepard doesn't do anything unprovoked. It's very much the same way that Bugs Bunny...
Where are you going with this?
In this episode, I am very much reminded of Bugs Bunny as depicted by Chuck Jones, in that Chuck Jones being the animator behind Bugs Bunny and the production lead, is that Chuck Jones had this rule that Bugs Bunny has to be provoked because otherwise he would be a bully, right? So just Bugs Bunny will be like, something happened, this means war, right? Direct quote from Bugs Bunny. And go after somebody and put them through all this torturous stuff. It's all because they started it, right? Which is kind of the moral equivalence in these particular episodes, because Shepard doesn't escalate stuff until Kolya escalates it. Thinks that Kolya has escalated.
Yeah, it's important to remember that for much of this, he thinks that Kolya has shot Weir and killed her. So, yeah he's pretty messed up.
So there is definitely a point after Kolya claims to have killed Weir where you can tell that Shepard is essentially like, look, it's you, me, mano a mano. Either I'm dying, you're dying, or the storm has taken us both out, but it's got to be one of the things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it is definitely not the same. Everybody on the Atlantis expedition is the moral center of the galaxy. Right.
Right.
But it's still justified relative to what's happening.
Yeah.
Right? Shepard is never the aggressor in this case. It's not like Shepard starts randomly executing Janai. It's the Janai are hunting him, so he takes out the Janai.
That's true, and he does spend much of his time evading them. Now, every time he evades one of them, they come back around, and he ends up killing them all. The scene where he smokes that one sort of rotunda room, and then the camera tilts up, and he's in the rafters.
Yeah.
And he's backlit and like through the smoke, and he just
it's
like,
very Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah,
this is
sick.
The 80s action movie episodes.
It very much is, and it was awesome.
Well, that's all I wanted to talk about for this episode. Anything else?
Oh man, I'm ruining my streak of pulling a Columbo. Just one more thing. Right at the end here, but no, I've said my piece.
That'll do it for episode 5 of the Iratus Complication. I've been your host, Michael, and this has been my co-host, Grant.
That's me.
We will see you next week.